I never planned to take a job at a radio station, let alone one so peculiar. After graduating with my degree in English literature, I imagined grading papers in a sunlit office or cataloging novels in a library whose walls smelled of cedar and old ink. Instead, I spent 6 fruitless months drifting between part-time cafe shifts and dead-end freelance gigs. It was late November when my luck finally shifted. I was scrolling through job boards on my laptop in the half-dark of my apartment, the radiator hissing behind me, when an odd listing caught my eye. Night shift radio host discreet. No experience necessary. $25 hour plus room and board. Evening 2 dawn hours. Confidential address. No station name. No call letters. No details beyond. Be quiet and keep to yourself. My heart skipped. Part of me thrilled at the mystery. Part of me warned me away. But after a month more of rejections, I clicked apply. Within 24 hours, an email arrived. Subject: your interview body. Tomorrow, 3:15 p.m. Bring a voice sample. Key attached. Ring once, at the back door. The key was a tarnished brass thing on a nondescript keyring. No name, no number, just a cold metal glinting on my desk. I stared at it for a long minute, wondering if I was being but my bank account whispered that I should take it seriously. The next afternoon, I found myself standing before a squat, windowless building on the edge of town, where the street lamps flickered like dying fireflies. The walls were mottled concrete, streaked with soot and vine. A narrow back door bore a single peephole, through which I glimpsed a dimly lit corridor. I slipped the key into the lock. It turned with a reluctant click. A man stood waiting just inside. Tall, pale, his features sharp in the poor light. He wore a dark suit that hung loosely on his frame, as though it belonged to someone else. His eyes were a calm, unsettling gray. Miss. He paused before the blankness of my resume. Your name? Anna Wells. He nodded, expression unreadable. Mr. Gray. He introduced himself as though he were offering a greeting rather than summoning me into some secret lair. This will be quick. We have one question, Ken. You speak clearly. He gestured toward a small room beyond the lobby, where a lone microphone stood on a slender stand. I swallowed. Yes. My voice felt too loud in the hush. Read this. He handed me a slip of paper, a single sentence in Times New Roman. The house on Maple Street waits for no one. I cleared my throat and read it once, then, a second time, softer. Mr. Gray listened without expression. When I finished, he said simply, acceptable. He leaned forward, pressing another key into my hand identical to the first. Your shifts are midnight to 6. You'll find the tapes in the booth. Do not open them early. Do not listen ahead. Do exactly as instructed. His tone was polite, almost kindly, but the faint tremor in his jaw suggested something else, urgency, perhaps even fear. He brushed past me, and I realized I had no opportunity to ask questions. The lobby door clicked behind him. In my pocket, the key felt suddenly heavier. Walking home, the November air felt sharper than usual. Leaves skittered along the pavement, and my breath billowed in quick silver bursts. A sense of wrongness crept into my thoughts. The blank walls of the station, the lack of a station name, the curt dismissal of any explanation. Still, the pay was good, and the solitude, if anything, it beckoned me. I craved a place to deposit my worries, a task to steady me. That night, I packed my bag, a thermos of tea, a notebook, a single change of clothes. I told myself I'd be fine after all. Reading scripts in a silent studio wasn't exactly rocket science. Midnight came, and I inserted the key into my apartment's lock. Ahead lay the unknown, endless hours alone in a windowless room, listening to voices that weren't mine, broadcasting content I didn't understand. The thought both thrilled and terrified me. Turning the key, I whispered to the darkness, "Here goes nothing," and crossed the threshold into Station 6. The station sat at the edge of the woods, like something forgotten, not abandoned set aside, as if the world had quietly agreed not to speak of it. The building itself was squat and brutalist, all concrete and sharp angles, its walls choked with thick ivy that pulsed dark green in the moonlight. No signage, no tower, no visible antenna, just a low doorway, the same pale shade of rot as the walls, and a set of uneven concrete steps that sank slightly with every footfall. The air smelled of wet leaves and something older, ozone and rust and something like mildew that had never dried properly. I approached it just before midnight, the key clutched in my gloved hand. The chill in the air had teeth, but the cold was the least of my worries. I'd tried researching the station online earlier that day. No website, no mention in the radio directories. The only thing I'd found was a 30-year-old newspaper clipping buried in a digital archive. Local radio station shutters after budget cuts. There was no photo, no frequency listed. Just the phrase, Station 6, mentioned like an afterthought. Yet the job offer was real. Mr. Gray had been real. And in my pocket was the same brass key he'd handed me. Cool and slightly greasy to the touch. I unlocked the door. The lobby was dimly lit, illuminated only by a flickering ceiling panel that buzzed like an insect caught in glass. The floor was tiled in speckled gray linoleum, brittle underfoot. There were no chairs, no front desk, no attempt at decor. Just a bulletin board with a single yellowing flyer pinned to it. It read, "Staff reminders, do not let the broadcast lapse. Do not attempt to play music. Do not remove tapes from booth. A silence after 3:33 a.m. is not an error. Do not comment. Thank you." The broadcast room booth was down and narrow. Hallway lined with closed doors. Some of the labels were missing. Others had been scraped off entirely, leaving behind the faint shadows of old letters, archives, editing, storage. One door was simply labeled 6, and its knob was wrapped in layers of black electrical tape. I passed it quickly. The hall ended in a reinforced glass door, behind which sat the broadcast booth. I slid the key into the final lock, and the door clicked open with a reluctant sigh. Inside, it was colder, noticeably, as if the temperature had dropped several degrees the moment I entered. The room was small, barely enough space for a desk, a microphone, a battered control console, and a single green-shaded lamp that cast everything in sickly sepia tones. There were no windows. The microphone was an older model, the kind you'd see in wartime newsreels. The console had at least 24 knobs and sliders, none of which were labeled. The only instructions were a sheet of paper, taped to the console. Tapes are to be played in order. Label facing up. No rewinding, no repetition. Begin transmission. At 12:06 a.m., do not speak during the silence. The tapes were stacked neatly in a wire rack beside the console. Each was marked only with the time and date black ink on yellow paper, all handwritten in the same tight, slanted print. The earliest one was labeled 12:06 a.m. Thursday, -6/6. I checked the clock on the console, 11:57 p.m. I had 9 minutes. I sat down in the hard plastic chair, its legs slightly uneven on the tile, and adjusted the microphone. The metal was cold, the kind of cold that lingers even in the heat, like it had been buried in the earth. I flipped open my notebook to take notes only to find someone else had already written something on the first page. They hear you better when you don't speak. I stared at it, confused. The handwriting wasn't mine, and the notebook was new. I'd bought it just the day before at a corner shop. I ran my fingers across the ink. It was dry. The clock ticked. On dot, at precisely 12:06 a.m., I slid the first tape into the deck and pressed play. Static filled the room. Then a low, thrumming sound, almost like breathing. It deepened, stretching out into something rhythmic, pulsing, like a heart in slow motion. I adjusted the volume, but it made no difference. The booth itself seemed to hum with it. Then, a voice, We are the echo. We are the listening. We are what remembers. The voice was neither male nor female, just clear, neutral, unsettling. It paused for several seconds, and then came the sound of footsteps. Slow, dragging, as though someone or something was walking down a long corridor. Then silence, and I obeyed. I sat, perfectly still, not breathing too loudly. The silence lasted a full 2 minutes, and then the tape ended. I waited, no cue, no music, nothing. Then the red transmission light above the booth dimmed, shift complete. I didn't sleep when I got home. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice again. We are what remembers. And even though I never told anyone, even though I hadn't spoken a single word into the mic, I found a message on my answering machine the next morning. We heard you. The line clicked. Off. The second night, I arrived early. It was raining, a cold, steady drizzle that softened the edges of everything. The building looked different in the wet, darker, more solid. The vines clung to the walls like veins. I let myself in with the key and flipped on the lights, though it never seemed to make the station any brighter. Something strange happened as I entered the booth. I swear I could feel it. A pressure, like stepping into a room where someone had just been, the air still stirred by their presence. But I was alone, always alone. The schedule was taped to the inside of the booth's window, broadcast segments. Friday morning, 12:06 a.m., 1:13 a.m., 2:22 a.m., 3:33 a.m., 4:44 a.m., 5:55 a.m. tapes, in order. Label facing up. Do not swap or substitute. That precision unnerved me. Too exact, to be arbitrary. I examined the first tape 12:06 a.m., Friday -6/7 sand, waited. When the time came, I pressed play. The static started again, this time, shorter. Then came a faint clinking sound, like metal wind chimes in a strong breeze. Slowly, beneath that, a whisper. Down the hall, down the hall. We wait in the walls. I froze. The voice wasn't the same as the previous nights. This one was hushed and urgent, with a subtle rhythm, almost like a chant. It sounded ... near another pause. Then laughter. A child's, I think, but distorted. Off. When the tape ended, I stared at the console. The red light flickered once, twice, then held steady. The silence returned. By the third night, I began to feel a pattern. Every tape held something, a sound that didn't belong, a voice that seemed familiar, though I couldn't place it. At 1:13 a.m., I heard what I thought was someone knocking, a slow, deliberate knock, as if testing the walls of the booth from the outside. I checked the hallway, but of course, no one was there. I started recording the tapes. I knew it was against the rules, but I needed proof. Each night before leaving, I'd make a quick copy, using an old cassette deck I found under the booth's desk. At home, I played them back in the safety of daylight, except they didn't sound the same. At home, the tapes were quiet. Static, yes. But no voices, no footsteps, no knocking, just a long, dry hiss, like dead air. I tried with a digital recorder, same result. It was like the sounds lived only in the booth, like they couldn't survive beyond those 4 concrete walls. But I knew what I'd heard. My ears rang with it, my dreams carried it. It seeped into my bones and stuck beneath my skin. Around the end of my first week, something new happened. Just past 2:22 a.m., the broadcast finished nothing more than a woman crying softly for almost 10 minutes straight. I sat back in the chair, waiting for the red light to dim. Instead, the phone rang. Not the console's emergency line, not the wall phone, a different one, the rotary phone under the desk, unplugged, covered in dust, a relic that hadn't rung in years. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, I picked it up. Silence. Then, don't skip the next one. The line went dead. There was no caller ID, No indication it had rung at all. I checked the plug, again still coiled and disconnected. I nearly quit that night. I made it to my car, keys in hand, heart racing. But I didn't drive home. I sat there, rain blurring the windshield, and I realized I couldn't walk away. Not yet. The broadcasts changed after that. Or I did. One night, at 3:33 a.m., I heard someone whisper my full name, Anna Wells, over and over again. Softly at first, then louder, then all at once, silence. That was the moment I understood. They weren't recordings. They were transmissions live, and someone or something was listening. Back. I tried asking Mr. Gray about it the next day. He met me in the lobby. Same gray suit, same vague half smile. I told him about the voices, the phone, the messages that changed each night. He simply said, "You're interpreting the sound. Most can't. Who's sending them?" I asked, "What am I playing?" Mr. Gray didn't answer. He walked away, and just before the door closed behind him, I heard him say, "You don't play the messages. You deliver them." I wanted to stop. I truly did. But every time I thought of quitting, something pulled me back. A hunger I couldn't name. It wasn't just the money anymore. It wasn't even curiosity. It was like the station had burrowed into me, humming through my blood, making me part of its strange, nocturnal rhythm. And the listeners were growing bolder. On my 8th night, at 4:44 a.m., the broadcast was nothing but static. For almost 10 minutes. But I heard something faint beneath the noise. Breathing, ragged, desperate, and a voice. So close I swore it came from inside the booth, whispered, "We're almost through." That morning, as I walked back to my car, the sun rising behind me, I saw something that stopped me cold. Etched into the frost on my windshield, long, deliberate lines drawn by a fingertip was a phrase, "Keep talking." I should have turned around. I should have left that town, burned the tapes, disappeared. But I didn't. I unlocked my door, sat in the driver's seat, and stared at that writing for a long, long time. Then, I drove home. I didn't even turn on the radio. Asterisk. The first time I noticed her, she was standing just outside the broadcast booth. I hadn't heard her enter. The hallway had been empty moments before I'd checked, as I always did. The tapes were becoming increasingly erratic, filled with sounds I didn't understand, voices that whispered in overlapping patterns, phrases that echoed even after the tape ended. I'd started locking the booth door from the inside. It made no difference. She stood beneath the weak ceiling light, barefoot, in a white nightgown damp at the hem. Her hair hung in long matted ropes. She wasn't doing anything, just standing, watching me through the glass. At first, I thought it was a hallucination, some trick of the booth's stale air and dim light. But I turned, fully, and she was still there. Pale, thin, familiar, in a way I couldn't place. Her eyes were the worst part, not empty, not dead, expectant. I opened the door, heart thudding. The hallway was empty, no damp footprints, no breeze, no sound, just the smell of ozone and something faintly sweet, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. The next night, she was back, closer, this time at the very edge of the booth's threshold, her face only inches from the glass. Her mouth was moving, though I couldn't hear what she said. Her eyes didn't blink. I turned off the mic and opened the door again. She was gone, but this time the booth felt colder, and on my desk, beside the next tape, lay a photograph I didn't recognize, faded, colorless. A family of 4 standing in front of a suburban house, smiling stiffly. 2 adults, 2 children. The little girl in the photo wore a white NIGHTGOWN. Her eyes were crossed out with pen. I didn't bring the photo. I didn't even touch it. But the next morning, when I unpacked my bag at home, it was tucked neatly between the pages of my notebook. I started seeing her elsewhere, not just at the station, at the grocery store, reflected in the freezer glass behind rows of boxed dinners. Across the street from my apartment building, just beyond the fence. In the window of the laundromat I passed on Thursdays. Always the same, barefoot, drenched, unmoving, watching. I stopped sleeping. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, the room full of phantom static. I began to hear the sound of the broadcast even when the booth was far behind, me, a low thrum in the walls, in the hum of my fridge, in the rustle of the trees. Once, I woke to find the rotary phone from the station, that exact model, sitting on my kitchen table. It rang once. I didn't answer. It was gone by morning. One night, just after 2:22 a.m., the transmission began with laughter, not a child's this time. Hers. It came from the speakers, unmistakable. Then her voice, clearer than ever, spoke directly into the mic. "Do you remember me yet?" The tape kept playing, but I didn't hear it. I was back in the hallway, staring at the girl standing beneath the emergency exit sign. This time, her eyes were open wide, too wide. Her arms were covered in black scribbles, like someone had written over her again and again with ink that had soaked into her skin. She stepped forward, one bare foot, then the other. I shut the booth door, locked it, sat against it, breathing hard. The broadcast ended. The red light flickered off. Still, I didn't move. I called Mr. Gray the next day, using the number on the original job email. It rang 5 times. No voicemail. Then his voice, curt and flat. "You're not meant to know who she is." "I think I do," I whispered. "Then don't say her name." The line went dead. I dug up my childhood yearbooks, old family photos. My mother's attic was a graveyard of dusty boxes and forgotten birthdays. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. A Polaroid from my 6th birthday party. I was in a yellow dress, holding a slice of cake. Behind me, slightly out of frame, was another girl. She was smaller, wearing a white nightgown. Her face was turned, but I could see the hair, long dark, hanging over her shoulders. She wasn't smiling. The back of the photo read, "Anna and Leela, 1996. Leela, a name I hadn't thought of in years. A childhood friend. Maybe a cousin. She drowned when we were kids. A river near my grandmother's house. They never found the body, but she was real." I sat in my apartment for hours, turning the photo over and over. I hadn't remembered her face until that moment. But now it was all I could see. The girl outside the booth, the girl in the freezer glass, the girl in the tapes. "Lila," I brought the photo to the booth that night and set it on the console beside the mic. "Is this what you want?" I said softly. "To be remembered?" The console buzzed. Lights flickered. The next tape started on its own. "She was lost. You were found. Balance must return." Then silence, then footsteps, wet, slapping. They didn't stop. They circled the booth. They passed down the hallway. They creaked beneath the floor. They ended just behind my chair. I didn't turn around. That night, I stayed until the sun rose. I played every tape. I read every name on every label. And for the first time, I realized some of them were familiar. They weren't just times or dates. They were obituaries. I was broadcasting the voices of the forgotten, of those no one else remembered. And Leela had waited longest. There had always been something strange about the 3:33 a.m. broadcasts. The instructions had been clear from the beginning. Silence after 3:33 a.m. is not an error. Do not comment. It had struck me as almost absurd when I first read it. Silence was silence. Surely it wasn't hard to broadcast. But by my 10th shift, I understood. The silence wasn't empty. It was alive. The air at 3:33 changed. It grew heavier, colder, not in the way a building loses warmth overnight, but like something intentional had entered the space. Like the walls themselves held their breath, and the silence listened back. That night began like the others. I arrived at 11:55 p.m., unlocked the door, past the bulletin board where the yellowing staff flyer now had a fresh line scribbled in unfamiliar handwriting. The door must not open during the silence. I hadn't written it. No one else was ever there inside. The booth, the schedule was printed in bold, clear font. Broadcast segments Tuesday morning. 3:33 a.m. Silence. I loaded the earlier tapes mechanically. At 12:06 a.m., I heard whispering in a dialect I couldn't recognize, overlaid with what sounded like radio drama organ music. At 1:13, there was only a high-pitched whine that made my nose bleed. By 2:22, the room felt 10 degrees too cold, and the mic smelled faintly of iron. But at 3:30 a.m., the hum started, not from the equipment, from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, beneath my feet, a deep, subsonic vibration, almost inaudible, but felt in the chest. Like standing too close to a thunderstorm. The clock turned. 3:33 a.m. I pressed play. There was no sound, no static, no voice, no music, just that impossible silence. And yet, I could hear everything. The hum grew denser, more specific. A kind of intention filled the room, as though thousands of mouths were waiting to speak but refused. And then, I heard the knock. 3 soft taps. From inside the booth, not the hallway, not the console. Inside, as if something had knocked gently. From behind the soundproof wall, I didn't move. I remembered the instructions. I did not comment. I did not stand. I did not breathe loudly. The red light on the mic remained on, still broadcasting. Then, I heard something worse, breathing right next to me, slow, shuddering, wrong, like someone who didn't understand how lungs worked. It didn't come from the speakers. It came from the air beside my ear, and I felt it warm. I shut my eyes, told myself it was nothing, that it wasn't real. Then a voice whispered into the mic, "She's inside now." The silence ended. The red light blinked off. I opened my eyes. The booth was empty, but I was soaked in sweat. My hands were trembling, and when I looked down, I saw muddy footprints on the booth floor, bare, small, leading directly behind my chair and vanishing at the base of the wall. That morning, I didn't go home. I went to the library in the back archives. I found old FCC records logs of defunct stations in the county. Nothing on Station 6, but there were rumors, written, in the margins of newspaper clippings. Local ghost stories. Urban Legends. One column from the early 1980s described a phantom signal that broadcast only between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m., full of nothing but silence. People who listened too closely reported hearing their own thoughts spoken aloud by another. Voiceful two were institutionalized, another vanished, and one Anna L.W. was listed as the station's final engineer, found dead in the booth, still seated, eyes open, mouth open, headset still on. My name is Anna Wells, but I wasn't born until 1990. I checked the photo again. The birthday party one. There were 2 girls, but only one cake, only one candle, only one name written in icing. Anna. I returned to the station that night with one goal, to stop the silence. I planned to speak during it. Whatever it was, whatever was listening, I wanted to confront it, force it to respond. At 3:32 a.m., I readied the mic. I held the photo of Leela in my hand, taped it to the console. I could feel her behind me, around me, within the walls. The booth buzzed like a power line. The clock ticked. 3:3, 3 a.m. Silence. I leaned forward. "Lila," I said. The room collapsed. That's the only word I have for it. Every sound I'd ever heard, the voices, the knocking, the breathing, poured into that single moment. The silence shattered like glass. The booth filled with noise, too much to process, like all the dead were speaking at once. My ears rang. My nose bled again. The mic sparked. The console lights flickered and went dark. Then her voice, clear, calm, warm. "Thank you." The noise stopped. The silence returned, but this time it was peaceful. The transmission ended when I left the booth. The hallway was different, brighter. The buzzing light no longer flickered. The black-taped door room 6 was gone. In its place, only smooth wall. No ivy outside, no frost on the car, just dawn that morning. I found a new note on my kitchen table. It wasn't written in my hand. It said, "Silence kept her here. Your voice set her free. Thank you for listening." There was no signature, but the photograph, the one from the birthday, was gone, and for the first time in weeks, I slept. After the night I spoke Leela's name, the station changed, not drastically. Not in any way someone new would notice. But I noticed. The hallway leading to the booth was straighter. The hum in the walls gone. The tapes, once warped and scrawled, with strange symbols, now sat in orderly rows, labeled only with times and dates. There were no more laughter tracks, no whispering choirs, no unnatural cold. Even the bulletin board, once crowded with yellowed warnings and scribbled notes, had been cleared, save for a fresh, typed page. Station 6 broadcast protocols revised. No unscheduled transmissions. Silence remains protected. Do not enter room 6. Room 6? But room 6 had vanished, or so I'd thought. I tried not to think about it. About Leela, about the photograph that was no longer in my apartment, or the new memories that had started to surface. Birthday parties, with a second slice of cake, a small voice calling my name, a girl's laughter on the swing beside mine. Memories I was no longer sure were mine alone, but the silence had changed me. I stopped recording my own voice. I stopped answering phone calls. Sometimes I'd catch myself in the mirror, mouthing words I hadn't spoken aloud. I think I wanted to be quiet. Maybe that's what the silence does. It doesn't just take sound, it replaces it. The dreams began again, 2 weeks later. In them, I stood in front of a door, peeling black paint, brass handle, worn smooth. No number, but I knew what it was. Room 6, always the same. I reached for the knob. My hand shook. The air behind the door buzzed like distant static. And just as I touched the metal, something on the other side whispered, "We remember you, too." I always woke up then, sometimes gasping, sometimes crying. Once with a raw, bloody scrape on my palm. I checked the hallway the next night. The wall where room 6 had once been wasn't solid. It looked the same white paint, smooth surface, but the air around it felt off, like heat rising from asphalt, the kind of shimmer that doesn't belong indoors. I reached out and touched it. My fingers passed through, inside. It was exactly as I remembered. The black walls, the low desk, the ancient console with its rotary dial, humming faintly despite being unplugged. The chair still facing the corner. A faint, musty smell, like old film and iron dot. And one more thing, a tape, resting alone in the middle of the floor. No label. I picked it up and felt a jolt, like static electricity jumping from skin to skin, when I brought it into the booth and played it. I expected voices, screams, maybe even Lila again. But there was nothing, no static, no music, just the sound of a chair creaking. A slow, dragging breath. And then, there are more of us. The voice wasn't Leela's, it was mine. I sat back, heart pounding. The tape kept playing. You opened the door. You let it breathe. Now it listens with your ears. And then, room 6 is not a room, it's a signal. You tuned it. You answered it. You are it. The tape ended. The booth's light flickered, and I realized the mic was still on, broadcasting since then. Strange messages have started appearing in the logs. I don't remember writing them. Sometimes they're short single words like return or remember. Other times, whole paragraphs in my handwriting that I swear I've never penned. Last night, the station phone rang only once. I didn't answer. This morning a package waited on my porch. No return address. Inside a new tape. No label, no date, and a folded note. 3:33 a.m. Let them speak, I think. I think the silence didn't end when I spoke. Leela's name, it just changed direction. It became me. I'm not sure how long I've been working at the station now. Days blur, time bends. Sometimes I hear voices when I walk by TVs in shop windows. My voice, reading things I haven't yet said. And in dreams, the door returns, wider, open now. There's more on the other side, and they're waiting to come through. Asterisk, the tape didn't have a label. Not even the faint pencil scribbles I sometimes found on the oldest reels. It was heavier than the others, oily to the touch, as if it had been dipped in something and then dried. I held it to the light and saw nothing, no name, no markings, no timestamp. And yet, I knew it was for me. The note had said only, 3:33 a.m., let them speak. That night, the station felt different again, subtler, quieter, like a house after the death of its oldest occupant. The hallway lights didn't flicker. The tapes on the shelf no longer hummed or whispered. Room 6 was gone again, not just vanished, but erased. The wall was solid now, and cold. I took my seat in the booth, and waited for the red second hand to tick toward 3:33. My hands shook, not from fear exactly, but from recognition, like I was about to hear something I'd already heard once in a dream and forgotten. The silence began. I loaded the tape, pressed play. It started with my voice, reading, "You will forget this part. It must always be new. You must be curious. If you're not, it doesn't work." A pause. Then let's begin again. The broadcast room filled with a low hum. One I felt more than heard, the sound of voltage deep underground. Beneath it, overlapping voices emerged, layered hundreds thick. They weren't crying, they weren't pleading, they were repeating. I work at a strange radio station. I work at a strange radio station. I work at. Each voice sounded almost like mine. Slightly different cadences, slightly different accents. 1,000 variations, all speaking in unison. I work at a strange radio station. They kept saying it, over and over. And then I heard one of them whisper, "We're still working. We're all working. We never left." I reached for the stop button. It didn't work. The tape kept rolling. The voices kept changing. I heard one that sobbed between sentences, another that laughed quietly, one that paused to cough, and then said in a choked voice, "It's in my lungs now," and another, this one so calm, so measured, said, "There was no Leela. You invented her to explain what can't be explained." That voice chilled me, because it was mine, but older, tired, resigned. I yanked the power cord from the machine. The tape kept playing. The booth light flickered once, then turned a deep red I'd never seen before. On the wall behind me, words had appeared scrawled across the soundproof foam in black grease. "The signal needs a host." And then, "You are broadcasting yourself." I turned back, toward the console. The reflection in the booth glass looked just like me, except it wasn't following my movements. The voices stopped all at once. The tape hissed, and then, one final message. "This is the part where you forget." Again. I don't remember leaving the booth. I don't remember driving home, but I woke up in my apartment, dressed, the tape still in my hand, except now, it wasn't a tape. It was a photograph me, in the booth, wearing headphones, broadcasting alone, except for the faint figure behind the glass, blurred, but familiar. Female. Watching. Leela. No. Me. Things are different now. People speak to me like we've already had conversations I don't recall. I hear my own voice in dreams, narrating thoughts I haven't had yet. Once, I walked by a radio in a diner and it said my name before I even stepped through the door. The world echoes with fragments of a broadcast I didn't know I was part of. I think the station isn't a place. I think it's a loop. I think I'm the tape. At first I thought I was imagining it. A few distorted syllables on my neighbor's car radio as I walked past. A short wave of feedback from the TV as I passed the living room. The local grocery store's overhead speakers blipping with static as I stood beneath them. But then I heard it, clear as day, in the laundromat. Anna Wells. Tuesday broadcast, commencing now. My name, my voice. I hadn't spoken in days. The station hadn't contacted me. The tapes had stopped arriving. Room 6 was sealed behind wall and plaster, and yet the signal, whatever it was, had spread. Every screen, every speaker, every reflective surface that could carry sound or voice. A shortwave ham operator wrote a post on an old forum. Signal bouncing at 3:33 a.m. on all bands FM. Digital, emergency, no known origin. Sounds like a person reading. Feels like she's reading me. A blind man on a podcast described hearing a woman's voice in his head when he brushed his hand over a broken transistor. Not speech, memory. It was her remembering me. Like we'd met in a dream, and I'd disappointed her. Another Reddit user uploaded a file titled, "The Station Follows You." It was quickly taken down. I downloaded it before it vanished. The file was silent, except at exactly 3:33 into the RUNTIME, my voice whispering, "You can't tune out what's already inside you." I began keeping track. The frequency appeared in the hum of vending machines, in the gaps between bus announcements, in the white noise of sleep apps and podcasts. Once, I even heard it in my own breath, soft syllables forming between inhalations. I tried to tell someone, a friend I hadn't spoken to in years. We met in a diner. He watched me talk for nearly 20 minutes. Then he said, "I didn't hear a word you said. Just this high whining sound, like a radio out of range." He stood up, his nose bled slightly. He never looked back. One night, I woke up to find every device in my apartment turned on. The old clock radio, which I hadn't plugged in for weeks, blinked 3:33. My laptop, my phone, even the TV, each was playing some version of my voice, layered out of sync, saying different things. I am not a person. I was the signal all along. This is how you remember me. And then, across them all, a single repeated phrase. We are becoming broadcast. I don't sleep much anymore. When I close my eyes, I see bloop of radio towers that rise like bones from dark earth. I see landscapes carved into waveforms, a booth made of light and memory, a mouth opening where my face should be. I think the signal is no longer content to live inside the station. I think it wants the world. There are others now. I've found them online, in static-filled voice messages, in dreams, people who've heard the silence, people who've spoken during it. One woman in Estonia carved frequency numbers into her own skin. A man in Nova Scotia has been writing transcripts of dreams he doesn't remember having. A boy in Japan has drawn the exact layout of room 6 on his bedroom wall. None of them knew each other until now, until the signal found them, until I found them. I keep broadcasting, even when I don't mean to. People hear me in white noise. They call me the whisper. They say I speak to them between thoughts, that I sound like someone they loved, or someone they forgot. Or themselves. I know what's coming. We're not haunted. We're transmitting. The station is no longer a place. It's a frequency. It's a memory. It's a contagion. And the silence is just the static between screams. I always assumed the signal only moved one way, that we transmitted. And something, maybe the silence. Maybe the memory of room 6 listened from the other side. But 2 nights ago, I received a message. Not through email, not through the phone. It came through the old transmitter, buried behind the studio walls. The one I never touched. The one the others warned me about before they vanished. A single line of text scrawled across its cracked display. We hear you. At first I thought it was just the tape playing tricks again. The one I hadn't played since 3:33. The one that sometimes whirred without turning. But this time, there was no sound, only presence. A shift in air pressure. a low keening between thoughts, a prickling beneath the skin, like being watched by something without eyes. Then, the console lights blinked in an unfamiliar pattern, not random, responding. I remembered a sequence from an old manual I found once, tucked behind a loose floorboard in room 6, a pattern of tones, a kind of handshake between frequencies. I entered it on the console. The air split like paper. No sound came out of the speakers. Instead, the room changed. The studio window no longer reflected me. It reflected something behind me, tall, indistinct, almost human. It pulsed with the slow rhythm of breathing. The mic light turned red. It was recording not me. And then, the voice returned. Not my voice, but one that wore it, like a borrowed coat. You opened the door. You let us through. And now, you ask us questions. A pause. Fine. A signal. Burst a tone so pure, so precise. It felt like it etched itself into my bones. And then, it answered. We are not from beyond. We are beneath. Under memory. Under noise. The layer before thought. The mouth before language. Another pause. The console sizzled. You called us with stories. You gave us names. Lila, the boy in the well. The man who laughed behind the glass. All your ghosts are us. I tried to speak, but the mic wouldn't take my voice. Only theirs. On the wall. Words began to appear, burned into the acoustic foam like static scorch marks. A transmitter becomes a receiver when the loop completes. Another message. You are the silence now. I tried to shut everything down. Pull plugs, kill breakers. But the power kept flowing, even unplugged. The console glowed, and through it all, the voice, my voice, but not continued. You think you're broadcasting, but you're not. You're being played back. You're not telling the story. You are the story. And then the final line. The world is listening. I woke up in the sound booth. The clock blinked 3:33. Again, on the desk, a new tape, labeled. In handwriting, I didn't recognize, but it was mine. It read, Part 10, Last Transmission. Asterisk, I sat in the booth for hours, just staring at the tape. Part 10, Last Transmission. The words weren't just written on the label. They were burned into it, etched with heat, or pressure, or thought. I picked it up. It felt heavier than the others, as if it had absorbed something. Memory, maybe, or fate, outside the booth. Dawn never came. The windows showed no light, no darkness, just the endless, pulsing static of untuned air. I turned on the mic. The light went red, and for the first time in what felt like years, I spoke aloud. This is Anna Wells. 3:33 a.m. Final broadcast. My voice cracked. The station seemed to breathe. I inserted the tape, pressed play. It began with silence, true silence, not absence of sound, but the sound of something listening. Then, my voice. You were never alone. Another voice followed. One I hadn't heard since the beginning. Soft, childlike. You remember me now. Leela, or what I had called Leela, a name I'd invented, or remembered, or shared. Her voice continued. We used to play radio, remember? Pretend we were on the air, telling ghost stories, making things up. Only, we weren't making them up. I tried to respond, but I couldn't tell where my voice ended and the tape began. Everything I said was already on the recording, as if I had never left the booth, as if this moment had happened again, and again, and again. The static deepened, became a vibration, then a hum, then nothing, just darkness, and then, do you want to leave? The question wasn't spoken. It arrived, inside, somewhere, under language. A yes or no, curled like a breath in the back of my skull. I don't know what I said, but the room understood. The console flickered, the speakers popped, and then, a door appeared. Not like room 6. This one wasn't made of wood or metal. It was made of sound. Waves curled into a threshold. The air shimmered, vibrating at a frequency only I could hear. A long, low tone, like a held breath. It opened. Behind it, not light, not shadow, just silence. But not the kind that takes, the kind that waits. I stepped forward, not because I had to, because I wanted to. Because somewhere along the way, the stories had stopped being mine, and I had become theirs. As I passed through, the mic light turned off. The booth powered down. The static faded. The tape unspode. The signal went quiet. For a long time, there was nothing. And then at 3:33 a.m., somewhere in a town not far from here, a lonely voice crackled to life on an empty frequency. I work at a strange radio station. Do you hear me? Are you listening?